I'm sure it just serves on my Jerry.
Are we on? We're on. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Village Board on Monday, March 4th at or around 7 p.m. at the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all village board members present except for trustee Pieper, who is excused. At this time, I will ask us all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item is President's report. Just a couple things to report tonight. The first item was brought to my attention from trustee Rick Miller. And it appears that the World Atlas, the one that used to make all the maps and have all the atlases back out there many years ago, but not as many now, but you can still buy an atlas if you still want to follow and watch a map as you're traveling, which my older brother does for some strange reason, but they're still out there. But what they came out with is a list of the 13 best places to live in Wisconsin in 2024. And Germantown made the list. We were last in the list. And those that were on the list were first Franklin, then Sturgeon Bay, Wauwatosa, Fitchburg, Whitefish Bay, Mequon, Cedarburg, Cottage Grove, Verona, Brookfield, Eau Claire, Fond du Lac, and then Germantown. And part of that, of the reasons of why they came up with this and some background about the list itself, it says Wisconsin has much to offer, from natural beauty and outdoor recreation to charming small towns and world-class cities. However, with over 5.8 million spread across 72 counties and 1,850 communities, it can be difficult to pin down the very best places to call home in the Badger State. To help narrow down the options, learn more about some of the most desirable communities in Wisconsin heading into 2024 based on factors like job opportunities, affordability, culture and arts, education, access to amenities, and overall quality of life. From serene suburbs in the outskirts of large metro areas to idyllic Lake County villages, these top places represent one of the finest locations the state has to offer residents and families looking to plant roots. Whether you have called Americans Dairyland home your whole life or just moved in from another part of the country, keep reading to discover the top places to live in Wisconsin this year. And for Germantown, they had written, this tiny village in Washington County was named among America's most appealing places to live in. It has a lovely small town atmosphere with plenty of greenery, offering beautiful parks like Spazlan Park and Schoenlofen Park. Rich golfing communities for adults and kids alike await at Swing Time Germantown and Blackstone Creek Golf Club, presenting exciting recreation opportunities. Although the housing market in Germantown has been rising in the recent past, with a median home price of $515,000, the median rent is still manageable at around $1,300. Meanwhile, one of the best events to look forward in Germantown is the farmers market, which best exemplifies the close ties within our communities. So congratulations to the residents of Germantown for hitting this list and making it as one of the 13 best places to live. I believe that part of the reason for that is because of our residents and because of the quality of life that we have to offer here. This is a very strong volunteer community, and we have a lot of good groups out there that support our community on a regular basis. And we have a very strong police and fire department that are very involved within its citizenry and have a strong presence within our community too. So I think that helps us make that list on a regular basis. So thank you all for that. The next item I have is there's been some information lately that's been out on different types of social media platforms. And one of them that's probably more readily read in this area would be Nextdoor. And there's been a fair amount of postings that have occurred on there that in the beginning were very factual based and presented good information about police and fire calls and how many police calls are going out on a monthly basis, which is very helpful because it helps to present how busy our police department is. But then it started to change and some of the postings started to push more into what I'm going to call misinformation and hyperbole. where they're looking to create a reaction to whatever that comment is being made. Some of those items we talked about at the last meeting. One of the posts out there expressed how the village was going to spend $26 million to approve the Holy Hill area. When that information came forward on the village board, it was actually about $7 to $8 million and not 26. And it wasn't the village wasn't going to be spending it in a sense coming out of general fund, but it was going to be an extension of the TIF and allowing those monies to come from 2 successful TIFs that are out in that area. Other misinformation was about the development that was proposed and discussed at the Plan Commission on Highway 145 and Donges Bay Road. It was merely a proposal for discussion of what that land use could possibly use for, and it was brought for Plan Commission. There were no plans to approve that, but it was merely a discussion point as to what we thought the use of that property could be, and if it was be a good use for what they were proposing. Other types of information that has come out through that next door is there was one stating how the village is out of control with its borrowing and how fast and how much money we've borrowed over the last couple of years that we're over the top, out of control. There is some information in tonight's agenda that presents more facts in regards to where our borrowing is and what type of level it is at currently to what our equalized value is overall. So one of the good things that a lot of the people that post on Nextdoor say in regards to Village Matters is to contact your village trustee, and I agree with that 100%. Go out, reach out to your village board members, ask your questions, your concerns, and you will get the responses that they have the information about for whatever topic you happen to have any concern or would like to learn more about. There is also our website out there that has a lot of good information in regards to what we're discussing, in regards to the different committees that are out there and the different areas of where development is happening or street repair is happening or any of the other projects that we have going on. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there that that information tends to be a little bit more exaggerated, and if you really want to find out about what's going on, you can either come to a village board meeting or absolutely contact your village board member. That's all I have. So next item we have is announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee and department reports, starting with committee chairs. Trustee Kaminsky.
Public Works will meet in this room on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Rick Miller.
General Government and Finance will meet on March 18th at 6 p.m. in this room.
Thank you. Trustee Hudson.
Public Safety will meet 1 hour before the rescheduled village board meeting of April 1st, or in the event that the village board chooses not to reschedule the meeting, the April public safety meeting will be canceled.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else has anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports they'd like to bring forward? Trustee Jan Miller.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to make everyone aware that there will be a chamber candidate forum, and it'll be held here at the Village Hall, and that will be next Tuesday, the 12th. Check me if I'm wrong. And we will have candidates from the school board as well as village board that will present. And so if you're interested about the candidates on the ballot for April 2nd, please attend.
Time?
It starts at 5:15, I believe, for the school board portion. When that concludes, then the village board portion will come immediately after that. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports they'd like to bring forward? Trustee Jan Miller.
Could we have our village clerk just reiterate when the voting starts? Like if someone wanted to come in person prior to April 2nd to the village hall, when does that start? Do you have that information available,
Clerk?
Donna?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Miller.
Sure.
Absentee voting always occurs per statute, the 9 days preceding the election, so there's never absentee voting that would occur on the Monday before. But if you go backwards 2 weeks, it starts on that Tuesday. So you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the following week, Monday through Friday, always preceding an election. And that's the way it is prior to every election.
So 2 weeks prior.
And it's for 9 days because it goes Tuesday through Friday the first week, and then Monday through Friday the following week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? Seeing there is no other reports, we can then go to citizen input. If there is anyone within our audience or joining us via WebEx that'd like to come forward for citizen input, if you're within our audience, please fill out a yellow slip and give it to the clerk and come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. If you're joining us via WebEx, please make the moderator known of your wishes to join in public input so that they can recognize you and bring you forward through the WebEx application. Just push it until the light goes off. Right in the middle of the base. Yep, it's a little bit below. Yep, push. There it goes. Perfect.
I left my notes at home. I left I had some stuff going on, and I'm gonna try to remember what I did a lot of studying this weekend and reading. And you know what you found out, Dean, about people is very true. I don't know what Nextdoor is, but I went around this week and talking to, everywhere I went, I talked to people who live in Germantown. And the biggest problem I see is there is a lack of communication between this board and spending our money and the public, the citizens of this county, of this village. They don't know what's going on. And they're not, we come in every meeting and make comments. You listen, they're addressed, nothing's done. Everything that comes in front of you seems like you vote yes. I'd like a new house. Maybe I should have the board vote it for me. It's ridiculous. You say yes to almost everything. And budgets have to be looked at, and tax money. And I looked up the biggest investors in this country. Right now, our country's $36 billion in debt. There's a big problem coming. And if we put this community into too much debt, we're not going to have the money. This is the largest amount of credit card debt ever in the history of this country. $18 billion. People and 401s are being devastated to pay their bills because they don't have the money. And why? And it's not it might be their lifestyles. I doubt it. They can't afford what they're doing anymore. Now the fires in Texas, almost all the cattle that in that area is going to be destroyed. You know what's going to do with the price of beef? We're going to be paying for that. And we're living in an economy that could blow up real quick if we don't stop and say, no, we got to look more at what we're spending our money for. And there's a law in this state also that any company that lays off people has to give them a 60-day notice. Right now, 16 companies are on the list of laying off 2,281 jobs. And these are all in communities surrounding Germantown. Maybe some of those people work here. That's not good. And I've talked about this budget. I do research every week. I look at things and see what's going on with my stuff and with here. And it bothers me a lot because nobody really questions stuff the way it should be. And it seems like every one of you has a different thing you're in charge of. And maybe you have a pet project or a person you know that wants you to vote for something. And we can't support all these pet projects. Even some important ones should be on hold right now. And not only that, but our debt, China is buying our debt. And here's the problem. China is backing off. And if we don't find a country to buy our debt, they're going to charge this country a lot of money. They have to pay our debt or we're not going to make it as a country. Our economy is going to collapse. And I don't think anybody here is realizing that. I study money very much. I was in charge of that for a company for all my life. And it's serious. It's very serious. And I'm getting very nervous that I see a board of people that need to stop and say, no, we can't do that right now. We can't afford that, not now, until we see what happens here in the next couple of years. And the layoffs bother me with these companies. And then I find out when we have these closed sessions, I looked up the law regarding closed sessions, okay? There's also a law controlling why you have a closed session, all right? And one I heard of that was told to me and is that when they were talking about, and I don't know all the facts, but the planning commission said they were asked to leave the meeting. They shouldn't be asked to meet. When you're planning, building anything, a planning commission is there to give you their plan and ideas and structure. And then whatever you plan should be put before the public. Public should be filled up here, coming in here, asking questions. And you have to have controversial input from the public that's paying for this stuff. You might get some ideas that might really help you. Everybody doesn't know everything. I'm pretty smart, but I don't know anything. I'm not a lawyer. I come from a family of lawyers and business people. But you have to get input from people. And when I was in charge of what I ran, I asked the people that worked under me, I'm going to have a meeting, I need your input. They have a lot of good stuff and they get people, but I'm saying the people here now that I talk to outside the public, they're getting very upset. I was very surprised. And that's not just my age. That's the younger people. They're nervous and they feel that they wouldn't be able to afford the taxes here anymore. I'm paying a lot for where I live. And who knows where that's going to go. But I'm reading laws every day and I'm just trying to encourage you guys, please look at things, get the public involved. It's a big pain in the butt, I know that, but they might help. They would have a better understanding to what you're trying to do. So all I'm saying is we got to start saying no or listen to what's happening here and what's going on in our economy, or we're not going to have one. And that bothers me, even my daughter, it bothers, I have two daughters and one I have issues with, but the other one is doing extremely well. And she's very smart and she's nervous. She says, what's the future here? It's very difficult. So all I'm saying is, please, I'm harping on budget, harping on you guys to look at stuff, ask questions. And even this path they plan, I asked 100 people if they wanted a path that you were getting money from the county for. They said they'd never use it. That was 20%. Why? I don't care if they're giving you money. When you take money from the government, you're going to obligate yourself for any future problems they have. They're going to come to you for the money and say, well, we need this. It needs to be maintained. We need this. And nobody even figures that out. All these questions should be asked. What's the cost? Who's going to take care of it? That should be asked before you do anything. And if this Green Bay Packaging wants a road, let them pay for it. They're $1 million company. Why should we have to pay for it? And all I'm saying is we got to start looking at what we're doing. I'm just asking you to, I'm not a jerk. I know every time I come here, I'm talking about budget because that's how I was brought up. And all I'm saying is we're in a serious economy. So please look at what you're doing and ask more questions and get the public involved because they're like this next door thing. I'll go look at it. I've never been on there, but people get upset because they want to know, they want some input. That's all I'm saying. So thanks for your patience with me.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward for citizen input at this time?
Form first?
Fill it out and turn it in after, but
Don't have a pen.
I came unprepared. Sorry.
Where am I? Steve. do you know how to say
My
this?
name is Wyatt Weir. I'm at North 103 West 16850 Wild Rose Lane, Germantown. I come before the board tonight with a proposal that won't cost you a dime. I'm asking that the annual brush pickup that is scheduled for June be moved up to maybe sometime around April. In January, we had a heck of a snowstorm, about 18 inches. And a number of my neighbors in my subdivision lost bushes, trees, all that stuff. And I think June is way too late for a pickup. As far as people picking or cleaning their winter brush and stuff. Last year I was at the city dump in March, well, but April, because it's not open, only one day a week or one Saturday a week in January, February, and March. And putting out your brush and waiting until June to be picked up is way too late. I'm asking that you reconsider maybe this year, bumping it up a few months so that people don't have to try to find pickup trucks, chainsaws, and all that stuff to clean up the waste that they have in their yards. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input? Thank you.
Melanie Smythe, N140W17938, Cedar Lane. Good evening. I've got several different topics. I'll try and speak fast. I agree with this lady over here that we need to stop subsidizing developers by moving the various projects that we have, $7 million, $26 million, whatever the number ends up being, into TIDS. Why do we want to continue to prolong not having these revenues available to us in the general fund and also in the school districts? It's holding back the kids' education to a certain extent because programs are not necessarily being able to be expanded. I also agree with her on the economy. There are problems that will be affecting our community, people, the government level, business level. We have a lot of reliance on German trade and partnering with businesses in Germany. If you've looked at what's going on in Germany and the manufacturing, it's not doing so well. Switching topics, I recently read this PhD paper that was written by a student who was going for his PhD from Northern Illinois University in the economic department. And it's called The Effects of Tax Increment Financing on School Finance and Local Economic Development. And they used 235 municipalities, and they found clear and consistent evidence that municipalities which adopt TIF experience a slower growth rate in property value than those municipalities that do not. There's a trade-off between higher growth in TIF district and lower growth elsewhere, which diverts the economic activities to TIF districts at the expense of the non-TIF areas in the municipality. We have that here. That's why we have to go out for a referendum to fund police and fire. That's not right. Okay, open meetings law, page 29 from our Attorney General. Nothing in the open meetings law prohibits a body from making decisions by general consent. But it does say that it's more appropriate for approving minutes of meetings and or adjourning, and that each item that's in a consent agenda deserves its own separate agenda item so that the proper minutes can be recorded and the proper voting can be recorded. And this is state statute 19.88 parentheses 3.209. The last thing, we seem to have trouble with administrator goals. So here's some ones that are my suggestions. Please put the residents and business owners first. Do not give up authority to the county, who appears to be muscling in on village decisions in a number of different ways. Please communicate clearly and frequently. Please fix the website to be more user-friendly, provide multiple ways of spreading news and events important to people within the boundaries of the village. Record all meetings. Minutes noted as draft should be uploaded for committees that do not frequently meet. There are still plenty of meetings that do not have draft minutes yet, even though they don't meet terribly often. Please, you're well on the way to fixing the fiscal reporting, so I'm encouraging that, but we do need the implementation of the software program. What's the latest on that? We should be reviewing the budget at every board meeting with attention to the add subtract from accounts as decisions are made, publish with the minutes. Going through the GGF meetings, it's with difficulty. There are no summaries for the trustees who should be familiar with the content. And there's just pages and pages and pages. It's just tremendous. Oof. There should be a scorecard of key financial measures to review month over month and year over year. Like, what is the debt per capita? We've learned that it's more than doubled in the 2022 annual report. Let's see, conduct the neighborhood meetings that were promised before any development occurs. Those have still not happened, and neither has the insurance meeting for when the water tower gets built, 3, whatever it is. Evaluate the cycle of committee and board meetings and ensure that there is adequate time for hearings, research, investigations into situations that come before the village government and staff. What ends up happening is that shortcuts are taken and things that should go through the cycle of the different committees to be discussed don't. And they just get jammed into a meeting before the village board, and then it gets voted on, and there's no time for real looking into things. Focus on running the village and not playing developer. Complete design standards for development in as soon as you can. Slow the rate of development so that it is incremental and natural rather than being jammed on, like I stated before on the TIFs. And meet with the school board once a quarter and find 3 ways to work together with them by mid-year. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input? You?
Good evening, Scott Heffley, W159 N10514 Old Farm Road. I will be brief. Just curious, I was here at the previous meeting. Who took notes for public safety? I didn't see anyone here taking notes. Minutes come from notes, correct?
It was being taken by recording offsite. She wasn't here. She'll be taking the meeting from the.
Okay, which
minutes
leads
from
into
the-
my next point. Where are the minutes for the village board from February 5th and 19th? They were not in the packet. You are technically just approving December minutes. I think we're a couple months behind. These are things that are important to keep track of where we're at. Those of us that are following along that do not have the knowledge you do sitting on the board. So I would appreciate more timely minutes being attached to the meeting. It's kind of a basic thing that you need to do as an organization. So that's my first comment. We're in March, we need the minutes, okay? A second comment, I know there's a debt presentation and I don't see Ehlers here doing it, so I'm guessing Administrator Krecklo is doing it. And of course, you know, I love charts. I'm a money guy, I love charts, all right? When I first saw the charts showing this upward motion, I thought it was the return of the S&P 500 for 2023. No, it's our debt load. And I know Dean Walters, President Walters said, well, listen, we're borrowing, we're well within our limits. I don't care about that. We're lucky our village is going up by, you know, 10% a year, 8% a year in the village. So if your numbers keep going up, you can always borrow because the limit moves up with you. That's not the point here. The point here is we were at a 26% debt load a few years ago, and now we're over 50% and climbing, over 100 million in debt. I am not making those numbers up. Okay, those numbers are true. Here's an example of another number I didn't make up. Because I come before you, if I'm wrong, somebody point it out to me. And if I'm right, you don't have to say anything. That's my rule. Debt load per resident is up 342% since 2018. Scott, where did you get those numbers, Mr. Heffley? From the 2022 ACFR. I don't think those numbers were made up by Baker Tilly. Okay? Go do the math yourself. That's a real number. Maybe you're not happy about it. Maybe you're not happy I'm bringing it up, but it's a real number, and that's what's happened. The debt load is $4,000 a resident. It was whatever, 13 or 1400. That's on the people sitting up here, all of you. That's how it got there. Old Scott, we did a generational thing for the DPW. Well, we spent a lot of money on that, but it's for everything. We're borrowing. Inside TIDs, outside TIDs, whatever we're doing. The debt load is increasing dramatically with no end in sight. So when I see a quote in the Express News that we have been good financial stewards, quite honestly, it tickled my funny bone, and it shouldn't. That's hilarious to hear that we're good financial stewards. We have to do a referendum to pay for public safety because we didn't address it in our budget for 20 years. Okay? These are realities. I'm not making this stuff up. I've lived here 30 years, as long as most of you. We've had a problem with public safety. We had a problem with we're just referending because we can't budget correctly, because we're spending too much money and deferring things into TIDs and not have the money to use to pay increasing costs of services for this village. That is a fact. I will argue that fact with anyone that wants to meet with me, one-on-one or in any open session. These are facts. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input? Is there anyone on WebEx?
Check again. No, there's not.
Okay, anyone else? All right, if there's no one else, then we can go to consent agenda. Board?
Consent agenda items A and B.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for consent agenda items A and B. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve? No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Nyrider,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jane Miller,
Aye.
trustee Hudson.
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
trustee Kaminsky, village president.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is new business, starting with new business item A, application for temporary Class B retail license for the Kiwanis of Germantown.
Approval is presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve?
Trustee Baum that made it.
Mhm. Trustee Hudson in the second. No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Not opposed. Motion carries. Next item under new business is item B, discussion on public safety building needs assessment RFP. Give us more background information on this new business item. I'll turn the meeting over to our village administrator, Steve Krecklow. Oh, I'm sorry, police chief.
Public Works.
That's why he's here. I was kidding.
Thank you. The Public Works Director asked that I could give just a kind of a background on this proposal. This goes back a number of years, late 90s, we started talking about a process to, what started out was a remodel project with the existing police department and the annex after we took that over from the library. We had put plans together years ago, and back then it was about, I think, $8 million to have that remodeled and the buildings connected. So we're still looking at a process, solutions for us. Our arrangement, our circumstances haven't improved over the years. We're getting bigger. Different issues we're having with security and just the infrastructure is such that we are continuously looking to upgrade. And it's at some point, it's just time for something new. And I certainly believe that we are at that point. We had not had discussions of a public safety building during that time. It was always a standalone police department. So that discussion is new. The discussion of the facility going where the old DPW building was a relatively new discussion that made sense for us based on the location of that building. If it's a public safety, I don't know how much sense that makes for the fire department, but that's why that location was initially discussed. It did make sense for us. So that kind of brought us forth to where we are now. We're running out of room just with the number of people we have right now down in the locker room, both the men's and women's locker room. We're just running out of rooms, running out of space in the roll call rooms. and just constantly revamping things just to kind of make things work. We've been doing that for years and years. So certainly, I think time for this discussion, and I'll turn it over to Matt.
So just a quick question, Mike. So what you're saying is the need for the police department or a revise of a public safety building is based off of the number of people you have today,
Absolutely.
not for anything that would be included in addition to the referendum that's coming up.
Correct.
And that,
Well, I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead, Mike.
Regardless of what happens with that referendum, we do have those needs right now, even space-wise. We've been running out of space for a number of years. So regardless if that does not go through, or if it does, that really does not impact what we're looking at for right now.
And I was here for public safety, and I think the similar message was from Chief Delane in regards to the additional firefighters that he has gotten in the 2024 budget. They need to seriously look at some of the accommodations that they have within the firehouse as well. It wasn't built for full-time staff when it was originally constructed. So now they're looking at converting some offices because it's a space need now.
Yeah, I think they're doing this kind of the same thing that we're doing. They're just changing things to try to make things fit, but they certainly have a need for more room.
Okay, thank you.
So based on that, we put the RFP together. This is the second time now that it's before you and it's in the packet. But it's really just a simple analysis of what space is needed based on the personnel that they have currently and the personnel that they expect to have, the equipment that they have, and the programs that they run. And then how do we fit that into space we currently have, the existing police station, the existing fire station, and how much more potentially space do we need? And then where does it go? If I were to summarize some of the feedback from the village board meeting a couple of weeks ago and the public safety committee, some of the things that were brought up were opening up the analysis to other sites and helping to determine the size and location of those sites, which I think this could do. The award method was brought up at public safety earlier this evening. And I believe Trustee Nyrider said that a presentation before the committee before award would be something that was worthwhile. Others mentioned that response time should be factored in, and that currently is listed as a consideration in the RFP. Holding off until the referendum, which will in practicality just happen anyway, because by the time this starts now, that will have been decided. And then there was a brief conversation about the cost. And because of this new look at the combined fire and police public safety facility, that yes, like it probably would cost more than just a police facility. So I'd be happy to take any more feedback or answer any questions.
Or Trustee Kaminsky.
Just a quick question. I don't know who would have the answer to this, but how old is the current police facility?
Built in 82.
Okay, the original building, and then you took over the portion of the library after that. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller.
And was that library building, is that about the same era? The old library building?
I'm assuming it was pretty close then, and then we would have taken it over sometime around 94, I believe.
Yeah, okay. When,
97, it was shortly after I started here, so.
oh, okay. But it was there when the police building was built?
Yes, it was already the library then.
It was already there. Okay. And then, I was also at the public safety meeting, and it was suggested that, and I agree, that we should be looking at, and it was brought up at the last village board meeting as well, that we should be looking at several sites. If I recollect, when we were trying to build the DPW, we had probably looked at, I'm going to say, a half dozen sites. And my understanding is that the current old DPW site has some work to be done as far as the ground. And then there is no water and sewer. And would you say, Chief Snow, that the hot spots for police and maybe you can't speak to fire, I'm not sure, but there was a real nice chart about hot spots in the village of Germantown. And to me, it looked like it was primarily in the southern part of the village.
Yes, I would.
Okay, so Division is not real far, but again, we don't have any sewer and water up there, and there has to be, and there is cost to that. Matt, would you have any idea what sewer and water going there might cost? 4, 5 million?
It's something we would have to take a look at.
Uh.
And we could, have that type of information available to line up with this report being published, so you could have decisions made that way. I would just say that when you're talking about sewer and water in the existing DPW site, another factor is that we already own the land there. So when we're looking at other sites, that's probably land that we'll have to acquire, and there'd be a cost with that. So it just depends how the balance out.
Right. Are there any sites available in the southern portion of the village of Germantown? Has that been addressed at this
No,
point?
And if the board chose to include that as part of this analysis, you could do so. But the village doesn't have particular sites in mind beyond the existing public works site. And then the RFP did talk about how can we repurpose the existing space that we do with.
Oh, you mean the current police department?
Yep.
Okay.
So it'd be a
But
comparable.
So it would what?
There'd be a comparable of what's there now versus what it would take on the,
Would they discuss building on the property, the current property? Or,
That's certainly an option we could explore. I
Well-
think in terms of the site, we can phrase the RFP however the board determines is most appropriate. Right now, it is written to just look at the two sites. How can we repurpose the existing site, and with a primary focus on the existing public works site? But feedback from the Public Safety Committee and in here right now is that maybe that should be a broader search.
I think it should be a broader search. I think we would be amiss if we didn't do our due diligence. And I think just looking at two properties is, because there would be quite a bit of work to be done on either site, either way you go. Because you'd have, if you wanted to use the current site that they're on, you'd have to do probably a demo and then a rebuild. So I believe there are some properties that might be available that should be consideration in the southern part of the village.
can I ask again why you're targeting the southern part of the village?
Because that's where the hot spots for all the calls are.
And that's a surprise to you?
No,
I mean, well, it would make sense to me because that's where the people are.
I know.
So you're gonna
I'm
have more
just
calls to
confirming
the
it.
southern side of Freistadt Road because that's where the most condensed population is. And if you probably looked at the calls that were north and ran some sort of perimeter as to number of people versus calls, it would probably be something similar. But one of the things that I think we're overlooking that was also brought up in the Public Safety Committee meeting was Trustee Delane, no, I'm doing what Mr. Chief Delane made a comment that the ISO standardization came out, and the village is rated with a rating of 3 and 10. 3 for the southern part of the village based on the proximity to the current fire station, and 10 to the northern part of the village because of its proximity to the current fire station. So with that in mind, those that are in the rating of 10, their property insurance or the amount that they're going to pay to insure their homes is higher than those it would be that are in the 3. So it may be better served for us to look at a central location for the next police or fire station or public safety, because then that would bring that ISO standard probably to something that's a little closer to each other and wouldn't punish those that choose to live in the country because they're further away from a firehouse. And the site that we currently own at the old Public Works building or current Public Works building, we do own that. And if you look at a map, it's pretty centrally located. I mean, from where it is to the county line to where it is to Highway 60 or Pioneer Road, it's about the same distance roughly. I'm not saying it makes it a great place. It's part of the RFP and it should be brought forward. The cost that it would take to develop it, absolutely. We need to look at that, to knock down the buildings that are there, to remediate the lands and where the tanks are, and to see what it would cost to bring sewer and water up versus a site that's clean and we would have to purchase and then kind of change over to our needs. I mean, those are the comparisons we're all going to probably be looking at when that RFP comes through. And that third final comparison would be seeing what can be done with the site as it currently stands. Whether you're pushing everybody into one building while you redevelop the other, or if you do a Miller Park scenario where you put your parking lot where your current building is and you build a new structure to the front of the parking lot, and then when that's done, you move the people into the building, knock down the old one and put your parking lot there. You know, there's a lot of different avenues and ways that we can look at this. And I think, you know, we should look at all of them, but shouldn't just wipe out the land that we own as a non-disclaimer, because we own it. So that there's some cost savings there. And when you're looking at a building of this type and the cost that it's going to be, and the last time I remember looking at it, which was, geez, like back 7-8 years ago, I think Zimmerman came with to redo the building we had, it was like $9.3 million to redo that building, something along those lines, 8 to 9 million. So we should consider it all. But I wouldn't say it should definitely be in the south. I think we should, for the residents and for their insurance purposes, look also at it as central location so that everybody has similar time access to get to them. It's just something to consider.
Yeah, that's an idea. And then I would also say that if you're looking at the police property, we also own the property that the fire department is on. Is there any space to expand that building?
Mhm.
We're looking for extra space. If we put more people in there, it looks pretty expandable to me, like you could go up to the second floor. I think we really need to include that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the simplest solution to add more people would be the Survive Alive house. Move them in there, put bunks in there. It's there. We don't use it for that much. It's a building we own. You could easily revitalize that and put, you know, living quarters for additional firefighters in the Survive Alive house.
But I think you could also add to the front of the, that building.
Mhm.
I mean, like a whole second story.
Sure.
I don't think it would be that hard, or just add on. And if we're not including that and possible other properties that are available, because it is, as you said, cost that we need to be aware of,
Mhm.
and convenience, accessibility to expressway, if we have to get to the other side. I think that's really important as well.
Mhm.
So I think that the RFP should be expanded to at least 2 other properties. And that should be included, and the fire department should be included.
Trustee Kaminsky.
I agree with Trustee Miller that we should expand this and do it once and do it right.
Yep.
Let's see what other properties might be out there. And let's see what the analysis shows, obviously, of where this should be located and what can and can't be done. I mean, we might, I personally like the old Public Works facility for its central location, but that may not work out at all. We don't know that. So I would just probably try to include as much as we could into this one RFP, so we really know what we need to do and we could quickly start moving ahead when we want to.
Matt, what's the budget on the RFP? Or when you put it out, we're just asking for what it would cost to come in and that would be approved? As we expand this out beyond, of course, that then expands the cost, correct? Or what they would come back with as a proposal to cover?
Sure, if we add additional hours, I mean, we don't exactly know that we're doing that based on what we've talked about today. But it's foreseeable that adding additional scope will add additional time and cost. The funding for this, when it comes to awarding the contract, will be brought forward, recommending ARPA funding. And we've estimated just in the ballpark of $100,000 to $150,000 allotted for that purpose. I think it'll probably come in less than that, but that remains to be seen.
Okay. Trustee Chan Miller.
So you're suggesting we use 100 to 150 ballpark out of the ARPA funds for this RFP only?
Correct.
And then what is the budget for the public safety building and how would that be paid for?
We don't know that yet, but one of the tasks in this RFP would be to develop a preliminary budget. And then how that was funded would be determined by you folks.
Yeah.
This is just an initial study to get space needs, site needs, and an approximate cost.
And would you open this up to a public meeting and show drawings or something like that? We have to get feedback. No, I know, but after the RFP. Even after the RFP, David?
No drawings.
Well, would we have a public hearing on the results of the RFP?
It would be brought forward before this committee because you would then be awarding it or not awarding it based on what they would come back with. And whatever group comes back with the request for bid, I mean, multiple groups will bid on it, and then it's up to this board to choose which one we want based on what they say their proposal covers. So you'll have, for example, and I don't know how many we're expecting, but let's say we get 3 to 5 bids coming in from our RFP, our public RFP put out there. From that, staff will look at it and probably sort down to an amount that makes sense based on the amount that we have available, and we'll propose that to the board to make a choice out of 3 or maybe all 5. I mean, I don't know how many we're going to get until we put it out there, but it'll be up to this board to choose one of those. And then that cost for that RFP will be part of their proposal that we'll either agree to or ask that person to, if we don't really want this and we remove it out, what will be the cost, through those discussions. But once you choose that group to make that study, then they come forward with, based on the outline of their study, that information, and then this board can choose how we're going to progress and plan and work out the costing and the type of building, depending on where the property is, or if it's already a building. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs right now. So to say that we're going to come with drawings, it's a little early in the process. But I think eventually when you're coming down to that finalization of building and site, yeah, you'd absolutely have drawings and you'd absolutely have meetings to show that. When that RFP and when that report comes back here for us to discern, that's also within a public meeting, like at the village board meeting, that they'll bring and we'll propose and go through it and decide what we like and ask our questions about, what they've come up with from their study.
A public meeting is different than a public hearing. So I'm asking about when the
Hearing
opportunity.
is only needed in regards to zoning or any other type of changes. This is requiring a public hearing of any kind, unless the village attorney can tell me I'm wrong. But at the point of where we're at right now, it doesn't require a public hearing. And we're not making any decisions on where the monies are coming from. And depending on how we choose to fund this, or if we choose to fund it, then a public hearing would be more in in regards to a need for however it's being chosen to cover the cost. But at the point where we're at today, there's no public hearing. It's all happening within a public meeting, which is the RFP and coming back with the study and looking at that. That's about the only point we're up to right now. We still really haven't decided what's the best place and what its cost is and if it makes any sense. And which part of it makes sense, public safety or police only? I mean, there's a lot of questions out there based on what this study is going to present for us.
Well, one of the other points that we brought forward was to hold off until the referendum was actually voted on, so that we have an indication of how many people we need to cover. We can always immediately and then have perhaps room to cover additional people going forward. But I think that it would be jumping the gun if we went for the RFP at this moment until after April 2nd.
Yeah, I just think for practical purposes, we likely wouldn't even have this out until after then. It's going to take, after this discussion and some modification of the RFP, it's going to take 3 or so weeks to get it out and get responses back. By the time anybody started working on this, it'll be after that. And both the police and fire chief mentioned in public safety, and I think Chief Snow just did earlier today, regardless of what happens with the referendum, there's current space issues. So either way, I think it's prudent to go forward with the study.
Trustee Warren?
So it's easy for us here to say, let's look at every possible vacant property and study that. But I'm concerned that that's a quick way for us to exceed our budget. Because if you get into the minutia of it, these consultants can come up with, well, we'll need a parcel about this many acres or this size. And here's one right here, but who's to say what kind of encumbrances there are on that parcel, what kind of easements, and who's doing those searches, those title searches? Now, maybe that's a little premature, but you'd hate to be identifying properties that are not even viable from ownership perspective or easement perspectives in that. So I think we should really have a maximum number of parcels that we would like to see from these consultants. Otherwise, they're coming in here saying, is it 2? Is it 3? There's 5 out there, but for them to do the research, the background search on this is going to take a lot of time. And is the village going to research property records to say, yeah, this is viable or not? So I'm just a little concerned that that's a quick way for this scope to kind of go way over budget if we don't really define that.
Trustee Hudson?
One of the things that this board did exceptionally well was to determine where the new DPW building should be. We looked at many different parcels. We spec'd out what we needed, and then we looked at different parcels and we discussed each one. And I think for our village, we made the right decision. I would assume, based on the results of how that process went, and I think we're all happy with how that went, we would follow roughly along the same lines for the public safety building. And I don't think when we looked for a new DPW parcel, we zoned in on individual parcels first. Didn't we attempt to determine how big of a building we needed and then went out and found the parcel? Is I think how we did that. And if my memory's wrong, somebody please correct me, but that process went, in my opinion, exceptionally well. So why wouldn't we attempt to figure out how big of a building we would need, which would then dictate a parcel that we would need? The same way we did for the DPW building. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say that the way that the RFP is written now, it's determining the size of the building that we need first. And then it's written, does it fit on the DPW site? Does it work there? If you want to modify it to open it up to other village-owned properties or to 3 or 4 alternatives, I think that's something that could be done.
But we could take I mean, the building is the building is the building. It doesn't necessarily matter whether it's on the DPW site or the 34 acres up the road that's for sale. It's the same building.
Right.
It does the study look at if it should be police department only and it would be this big, or if it would be public safety and it would be this big?
Yeah, I mean, it does address the issue of the shared space and does that work on the site? So kind of regardless of what happens tonight, it sounds like there's going to be some modification to kind of the site aspect of this. So how it's worded is going to be redone here in the next couple weeks based on the feedback.
Well, then I guess the question I would ask is, does this board want to dictate what we are looking for before the consultants? Or do we want the consultants to dictate that to us? So do we want to tell them we're looking for a combined site? Or do we want to tell them that we're looking for a location only for a police building? That's my question to Trustee Bowman.
Okay,
Thank you.
Trustee Ball?
So what I would say is the RFP is going to give you the criteria for the building, just like we did on the DPW. What do we need in this building? Then on the DPW, we said, can we fit this on the current site? It would fit on the site, but when you propose for addition, the future didn't fit on that site. So therefore, we went out and looked for other sites that would fit the future of the building. That is what I see for this project here, is we will get the criteria, which will give us a size and scale of a building, 1-story, 2-story. If we buy 38 acres, we can sprawl that building out on 1 story. If we're going to be on the current site here, it's going to be 2 stories and we're going to have to be compact. But we'll have a size requirement. Then we can look at, we want to be here, do we want to be there, do we want to be north, do we want to be south, much like we did with the DPW site. We got a preliminary idea of this building, then we tried to figure out where it's best. That's what we need to do on this. Go out and get the proposal, which will give us the size and configuration, general configuration. Then we start talking about the site, not start talking site day one.
So are you then saying, based on that response, that we should just stick with the one site as currently designated, which is the DPW?
You can, I don't even have to talk about a site right now. I have to talk about whether I'm going to be a condensed multi-purpose building, or whether I'm doing 2 separate buildings, whether I'm doing a sprawling building, or whether I'm doing a compact building.
Okay.
Those are the criteria that they need. Once they understand that we want something, we want to be able to put it on a tight site, we want to be able to put it on a farm field. Then they can start, then we can start working with them as to where are some decent sites to look at. Does it get served better? Does this program work better on the south side of town, or does it work better on the north side of town? But we're not going to pin it down to a single site day one. Much like we did with the DPW. We started looking at other sites that would fit this configuration of a building.
The benefit that we had with the Department of Public Works site is we knew all the equipment we had. We knew that we wanted to put the recycling center on there, and we knew we wanted some opportunity for future growth. In this scenario, we're saying, I'm going to go back to trustee Hudson's question, police department or combined? And are we directing them one way or the other or give them the opportunity for both?
Right now, what is the criteria that we need? We need so much room for fire department. We need so much room for police department.
Correct.
Okay. You want to put it all into one space? You want to put it in two spaces? The RFP is determining how much space and the needs that we're going to have. How many fire trucks are we going to have in the future? How many police cars are we going to have in the future? That's what this RFP is really going out for. Then, once we get all that, then we come back with a second attempt at it that we sit and talk about. Do we want it in a single building? Do we want to expand the old fire station? Do we want to expand the police department and keep them separate? That comes in the next phase. But first and foremost, what we did at the DPW, give me an assessment of all the vehicles that are going to go in here today and 20 years from today. That's where that started with, is the assessment of the needs.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, just to follow up with trustee Baum, that's kind of how I see it too, is you got to look at space needs. And that's really the heart of this thing. But to go along with that, we have 3 potential properties, 2 that currently the police department is on and the fire department is on. So we could look at those as, is it feasible to add on to those or to utilize those? It's logical to look at the other property we own where the public works is. Does that fit? That's kind of what we did with public works initially. This is what we need for space. We looked at it to see if it fit on there. Ultimately, it didn't. So I think we're looking at space needs first. That's the biggest issue of this. Whether it's combined, not combined, I think the second part of this is, can we add on? Is it feasible to add on and make sense to add on to the police and fire buildings now? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If not, alternative, look at public works, where the public works building is now. Is it going to fit there or not? I don't know. But that would make sense to me, is feasibility of, I'm sorry, space needs first.
Village Administrator.
No, thanks. I just wanted to interject that as we're listening to the feedback, I think, hearing all of the points that are being made, it's something we could go back and, as we're reworking on the RFP, actually put this together as a multi-phase project. And, with the first step being, look at what are the space needs, answering some of those basic questions of, does it make sense to try to look at a combined police and fire public safety building or not? Are there response time? Are there locational needs consistent with each other? I don't, that's the type of thing that we can examine and take a look at, and look at some of the existing sites, and without getting into specifics, alternative sites, maybe getting some cost estimates on, if we need 20 acres, what does a 20-acre site with a water and sewer connection cost in the village of Germantown right now? And getting some information like that without getting into a lot of specifics, and then bringing that back to the board to kind of make a first round of decisions before getting into a second round. And I think that does kind of mirror the process that we ended up going through with the Public Works building, and we could incorporate that into the RFP and the process we'll be going through with the consultant going forward with this building.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Has the police or the fire department done a needs assessment now or recently? The way DPW did it.
We had started one with Zimmerman back in 2020. We were
Oh.
in the very early stages of that before COVID kind of shut it down.
Okay, so you had started it, but never finished it?
Correct.
Do you still have the data? Is that a place where you could start? I don't know. Or is it so old?
We still have what they did for us at that time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Baum.
whoever you're going to hire as a result of this RFP should do their own data collection. You don't want to, nobody knows what questions they asked, how they did it. It was 3 years ago. You want the latest and greatest, so you want to get all the information up front today.
And another reason we're taking another look at it is just all the new considerations that didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago. The dispatch consolidation, the needs of the fire department, and the availability of the public works site being 3 of them.
And just technology. We've got to fit that all in.
Anything else? So it's just basically a discussion on what we're looking for, needs assessment. No action. Anything else? We can go on then. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chief. We go on to the next item, which is item C, presentation on Village of Germantown debt levels. Village Administrator Steve Krecklo will take over this portion.
Right, thank you. Actually, as I get into this presentation, just talking about where the data is coming from, most of the information that providing here comes from the 2022 annual comprehensive financial report. And we did also put together some preliminary numbers for 2023 that are added in. There's some key concepts, and especially when you're looking at tables in the annual comprehensive financial report, there are different tables that are constructed to basically provide different information for different purposes. And there's 3 different kind of different perspectives or viewpoints on debt, the ways that you can look at it with different types of debt that the village issues. And I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit more specifically. There's general obligation debt versus revenue debt. There are bonds versus notes. And then there's levy supported versus non-levy supported debt. And it's important as you try to answer the question, you know, how much debt is too much debt? Those are key considerations to make. So I'll talk first just about general obligation versus revenue debt. General obligation debt, or sometimes it's referred to as GO debt. When we issue that, we're legally pledging what's referred to as a full faith and credit of the Village of Germantown to pay off that debt. And what that means is that any revenue that we bring in is obligated to pay off that debt service, and including the property tax, and that we're obligated to, if it's needed to pay the debt service, we're obligated to increase the property tax levy to make that payment. So just as an aside, if you look at levy limits that the state put in place, that's why they don't apply to the debt service budget, because we're legally obligated to put the full faith and credit of the village into making that payment. That also means that the debt service can be paid for from any revenue stream. We can use any revenue that we want to pay general obligation debt. So we have some general obligation debt that we pay the debt service from utility revenue. So at times in the past, the village has made the decision to issue general obligation debt for utility projects, but the utilities are the ones paying that debt service. And the reason we do that is general obligation debt usually pays a lower interest rate than revenue, because again, we're applying the full faith and credit as opposed to revenue debt, which is just applying just committing a specific revenue stream. Now, a general obligation debt does count towards statutory debt limits, and that's all. That is the reason why sometimes the villages or municipalities may choose to issue revenue debt. It's because that debt does not apply towards statutory debt limits. So when you're looking at those calculations, general obligation debt is in those calculations. revenue debt is not in those calculations towards the statutory debt limit. Both types of debt are included in the total debt calculations. So if you're looking at tables in the annual comprehensive financial report that talk about total debt, that includes general obligation and revenue debt. There are other tables that only look at general obligation debt and only look at revenue debt. So it's important to kind of keep those differences in mind when analyzing the numbers in the ACFR. There's also a differential between bonds and notes. Typically, for our annual capital program, the village issues 10-year notes. And for bigger projects like the DPW building, we issue longer-term bonds. And bonds can be up to 20 years. Notes, the maximum is 10 years. When we issue bonds, there's also more restrictions that the bond proceeds have to be used on projects identified in bond issuance. So, for example, we borrowed money on for the DPW building. We couldn't use those bond proceeds to buy a new fire engine or a DPW patrol truck. Those are limited to the purposes that are identified when the bonds are issued. Notes, on the other hand, and this is one of the reasons we use those for the capital program, is there's more flexibility in how we use the funds. So if we're issuing general obligation notes for our capital program and one of the projects comes in significantly under budget, the village board has the flexibility. You can shift those proceeds over to a different project that maybe is over budget or something else that you want to do. Bonds and notes can be either general obligation or revenue. So you could have general obligation bonds or you could have revenue bonds. You can have general obligation notes or you can have revenue notes. They can be used either way. The GO versus the revenue just denotes where the revenue is coming from to pay for the debt service. Bonds, as I mentioned earlier, are used for larger generational type projects. You don't want to use those for your annual capital program, things that you're doing on a regular basis. The notes, it makes more sense to use for the annual capital program. The things that we've been issuing bonds for, are a public works facility that has, anywhere from a 50, 75, maybe even 100-year life expectancy for that building. Or when we're expanding utilities and putting sewer and water pipe in the ground, or a water tower up that again has anywhere from a 50 to 100-year lifespan, that it makes sense to use longer term debt to finance that. And then the final category here is levy supported versus non-levy supported. And this is an important distinction for the property taxpayer. For levy supported debt, debt service is paid from property tax revenue. So each year when we go through the budget process, part of the budget that you look at is the debt service fund, and that is the amount that's levied every year to pay levy supported debt. And therefore that debt directly impacts property tax bills. We also issue non-levy supported debt, and that's paid for sources of funds other than the property tax levy. The two main categories of those are utility debt, where we issue debt that utilities pay back, and obviously that comes from their revenues that are collected from quarterly utility bills. And then the other major component are the tax increment districts, and the tax increment districts pay the cost of the TID debt service based on the revenues that they collect, as you see from the Ehlers reports. Non-levy supported debt has no impact on annual property tax bills. It's only the levy portion. Levy supported debt it wouldn't have to be, but it is always general obligation debt. And on the other hand, non-levy supported, it can be general obligation debt, but it can also be revenue debt. It depends on the type of project. So I wanted to kind of clarify those as we get into some of the numbers, that it's clear what the numbers mean and what we're talking about. So first, and this was one of the things that, just kind of saw some numbers floating out there. And some of the comparisons, we're looking at general obligation bonds. There's a table in the annual comprehensive financial report that looks at general obligation bonds over time. And you can see here, these two charts show that general obligation bonds per capita and general obligation bonds to equalize value. And you'll see this kind of repeated through different charts. There's 2 times where these numbers increased over the past few years. One was in 2018 and 19 when we issued, we had several debt issuances that paid for the cost of the infrastructure, that basically extended infrastructure from what in 2017 was its terminal point at the intersection of Goldendale and Freistadt, all the way north and to the west up to Holy Hill Road, where those business parks are developed. And then that second major line up was the debt that was issued for the Public Works facility. And in both of those cases, we used general obligation debt because those were long-term projects, and it minimized the interest costs for those borrowings. Now, one of the differences is that the most of the debt that was issued in 2018 and 19 was not levy-supported debt on these charts. It's paid for out of the tax increment districts and to a lesser extent from the utilities. The debt that was issued for the DPW building is the majority of it is levy supported and paid for out of the property tax levy, but the utilities are also paying a portion of it because they're using a portion of the DPW building. And then finally, you'll just notice that, again, you're going to see this repeated in all of the slides. If you look at 23, what those numbers are going to look like is you're going to see these numbers going down because the village did not issue any debt in 2023. If you recall, when we made the decision to do the borrowing for the DPW building, we decided to fund the 2023 capital budget out of reserves. So there was no new debt issued in 2023, but we did pay off some of the principal and interest that was out there. So the next slide here looks at total debt per capita and from 2013 to 2023. And again, you can see where the 2 increases took place. The debt levels for Germantown were very, very low in the first part of the 20 teens, at $1,500 per capita, which I did not do a comparison with other communities, but there are not many communities that maintain debt per capita levels of that low. It went up in 2018 and 19, you see that, and then the increase in 2022 for the DPW building, and then coming back down again. And here is a chart with the statutory debt limit. This looks a little bit more level because, and I think in part because of the investment in infrastructure, you've seen equalized value going up. So the lines are a little bit less dramatic. But I think the main takeaway here is that our debt levels as a percentage of statutory limit are very low. Even at the peak here, it's at 50%. And again, if you recall the Ehlers presentation when the village board made the decision to move ahead with the Public Works building, it was that, yes, as a percentage of our statutory limit, we're going to go up, but it remains within reasonable limits. If we make a decision in a year or two to go forward with a public safety or a police building or a fire building or both, that'll go back up again. We'll have to issue debt to pay for that. We don't have that kind of cash laying around for a $15 to $20 million project. And that line will go back up. But as we pay off debt and as our equalized value grows, those lines are going to remain within manageable areas of our statutory debt limits. So some conclusions here. Village debt has increased over the past 5 years or so. And that's because of some of those large, and, I use the phrase generational projects. What that really means is they're long-term investments. They're, investments that are 50 to 100 years in useful life. And those were for the infrastructure improvements to the Holy Hill District. And, there we've seen already, $350 million in new tax base. And then secondly, construction of the new DPW facility, which is a state-of-the-art facility. It's built to allow for growth in the community and in DPW's needs. And it's being built in a way, it's not a cheap metal building. It's a concrete, building that's going to last, into the, it feels weird saying this, but it'll last into the 22nd century. And they'll still be using that, long after any of us are around Village Hall anyways. I think, I don't know, probably longer than that. But second conclusion, and I actually, they aren't here tonight, but I was having I did have a conference call with Ehlers on another topic earlier today, and just talked a little bit about this presentation. And, they would concur that village debt is well within parameters of sound fiscal management. And they would have no objection to that statement. So we've completed those other large projects, and we've maintained capacity for future large projects, including the new public safety building. And then another item that's further out on the 5-year plan is a library expansion. And any of those projects, all of those projects will involve debt and will, cause some of those lines to go up. And I mean, would also say, just listening to some of the conversation about the public safety building, and the library, and some of the questions about when those things were built. The village went through projects, a period of 10 or 15 years, where a lot of the facilities that people have been enjoying for a long time were constructed. And, and debt was issued to construct those buildings, and debt was paid off. But for the library, for Village Hall, for the police building, for the fire station, those were all projects in the 90s and early 2000s that were, were funded with debt, that were constructed, were needed by the village. And we're going through another round of that during this period of time. So I guess this was a brief presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Board? Trustee Jan Miller?
So thank you for this, Steve. So my question is, in one of your reports, you said that we would have a presentation by Ehlers on investments. And I think we're about due to have Ehlers in for, a TID evaluation as well. And you're saying that our debt is, let me get the verbiage here. The village debt has increased mostly, okay, generational, and the debt is within parameters of sound fiscal management. We obviously we had, if you look at 2013 through about 2019, I'm going to say, we didn't have, we kept more flat on a debt level percentage-wise. And now we're at about 20 some percent. And now we're up to 50. Now it's going down. But the debt is also for the DPW and TID 9. Aren't we going to be seeing some added tax to the 2024 tax bill due to the DPW? I thought that was in one of the presentations by Ehlers.
No, they had looked at some options for phasing in the impact of the debt service. And I think ultimately for the DPW building, and ultimately what the board decided was instead to use reserves to fund the 2023 capital budget. So there won't be any significant impact on the tax bills that residents receive next December, based on the debt service for the DPW building.
I thought it said on TID 9 that in 2024, we would be getting an increase for the tax bills,
Well,
like
first of all,
$300 or something.
TID 9 does not impact property tax bills at all. The portion of the debt that we took out for the DPW facility, that did, but that was on the property tax bills that were issued at the end of 2022.
So it stopped.
No, it's not, it's continuing, but the increase that people saw was on the tax bills that they got in 2020, in December of 2022. That's when people saw that increase. And I
And they're-
remember that well because we did get a lot of calls and folks
Yes.
saw it. It was a
Yeah.
noticeable thing. But that's when the increase in the property tax levy for the DPW building debt service hit.
But it's still there.
Yes, it will be there until 2042. Those were 20-year bonds that were issued. But
Does it fluctuate at all?
not much, not much. It was, you have to go back to the bond sale document. But generally the payments, when the payments are due, it's relatively level over the portion of the 20 years.
And like a home mortgage?
Yeah, it runs very, it's not a home mortgage. A lot of people kind of think about that. It's actually, I mean, these are actually bonds that people purchase and they're serial bonds. So each year a bond comes due and then the bondholder is, basically turns that into, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but the DTC in New York, and that bondholder is then reimbursed for the value that the principal and interest that they agreed to purchase it for in 2022.
So what other contributing factors do we have that would impact the residents' tax bill in 2024? Aren't we getting an increase in our water bill as well?
It's not taxes.
Yeah, that's not on the
Levy bill.
property tax bill, that's
Property.
the quarterly utility. And
Yes.
there is what the Public Service Commission passed
Yes,
a few years ago it was a two-phase
right.
rate increase, and the second phase will be implemented after the completion of a couple of construction projects, the construction of the new tower, the new well, and the new booster station. When those are complete, according to the PSC order, then the second phase of the water utility increase will be in effect.
And not before?
Correct.
Oh. Well, that's a whole nother line of questions, but a review from Ellers would be greatly appreciated.
We had a review of the TIF at the last joint review board meeting that we had. We had one less than 3 months ago
Yes.
in front of a village board
Yes.
meeting. Why do we need another one within a year, within the same year when we've already had two?
Well,
What would change?
Not everybody is TID 9 was not discussed at the joint review board.
Sure it was.
No, it wasn't.
It actually,
It hasn't come online fully yet. So,
It wasn't discussed.
all right, because.
well, there's no data available. There won't be for TID 9 until the end of this year. So when Ehlers comes in and provides those presentations, what they're presenting is the information that's reported to the state on an annual basis. So there's a form that at the end of every year that the village has to fill out that has that lists, expenditures and revenues for each one of the tax increment districts. The assessor provides information on how the, how much increment is there and what the property taxes collected on those properties were. And that's provided to the State Department of Revenue. Ehlers takes that information and they put it into an annual report that's presented to the Joint Review Board. So that's why there wasn't anything for TID 9 because it hasn't completed a full year. So there was not an annual report. There was no data to report, and there won't be for TID 9 until like December or January of this coming year.
But there is some sort of a spreadsheet because it was presented at the 2024 Ehlers financial program. That was your presentation.
That was the cash flow projections that they provided
Excellent.
to
Okay.
the village board and the Joint Review Board when TID 9 was created. So those were numbers. There were no new numbers there. That was just restating for the purposes of that seminar, the cash flow projections from the original documents.
I see. And is that posted on our website?
It's available on there. All of the TID project plans are available on the website. They're not on the front page because, again, that's something that was quite a while ago, but they are available if anybody's interested in them.
All the TIDs have a pro forma on them. As each one comes forward and goes through each of its different approvals, a pro forma is presented by Ehlers for the full 20 years of the TIF, every single one of them.
Right. I didn't see it on the website.
Okay. Trustee Warren?
So it's nice to have reserves to reduce our debt. What's our current reserve? Do you have that number offhand?
I don't have that off the top of my head, the dollar value. What I can say is that after 2023, we're now, the target range that the village had set several decades ago was to maintain reserves between 15 and 25% of general fund revenues, and we're within that range right now. So at this point, it's a good place to be, but there are no longer excess reserves to use for purposes like that.
And how do we determine what gets put into a reserve?
It's at the end of each year. Any money that's not spent out of the budget or any revenues that came in over budget drop to the bottom line for that year, and they become part of the general fund balance.
Board decides where they want to put it.
And does, I can't recall, does Ehlers look for their forecast? Do they assume a certain amount in the reserve to assist with the deferring the borrowing?
Only in TIF 9 and part of the
DPW building.
PW building, did they present it? And that's the reason we built it that way, was to keep the debt service to the residents down. So that's why we didn't borrow any money that year for capital projects. We took it out of our reserves, which we were fortunate to build up off of positive revenue years previously. And I think you said on the board the last time that we had some of those, and we're making decisions of either to put it in reserves or use it to pay down debt or to pay for some additional capital items that were maybe not approved during the last budget cycle.
So that's our money. We can spend it wherever, or however we want.
You have to keep a certain percentage overall in place. We've decided to keep a much higher percentage in, but I can remember when I was first on the board, we were below what was the allowable percentage. We were down into 5%, and we were struggling to get it up to 7%. But the state says that you have to have a certain amount in reserves to cover any disaster possibilities. So a tornado wiping out some big utilities or something along those lines.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have a few. So the last time we did our 2023 audit, was the debt of TIF 7, 8, and 9 and the Department of Public Works building in that audit? As
Yeah.
part of that audit?
Yeah, in the 2022 audit, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then from that, did, that debt that shows that blip up, did that change our bond rating at all?
No, nope, we maintained our bond rating and with a stable outlook.
And Moody's gave us a positive result and a positive rating based, which included all of those debt service.
Yep, the AA2.
Okay, thank you. If, let's say that whatever reason, there's a different board here, and they choose to go up to the max allowable debt service, that the Village of Germantown can have, what is that? What is the very max amount that we could do?
You know, I've got that number here. Well, we're at about the 50% level, so, at the end of 2022, the unused debt limit was $89,052,195.
So you could take that plus what we have already, and that would be our max.
Correct.
So we're
About half.
we're a high third of it?
Well, the statutory debt limit at the end of 22 was 177, I'll say 177.8 million.
Okay, and we're currently at?
Our total outstanding debt was 88.7 million, which leaves 89.1 million available.
Okay, so half, that shows the 50% line.
Yep.
Okay. All right, and not that I'm looking to hit the max, it's just a comparative of where we are versus what we could be if we chose. I don't see this board choosing that. And then, in your opinion, is the village debt service out of control, or are we within a conservative means?
I think it's very much not out of control. I think the community has used debt conservatively here. I think that, but the other thing that other communities I've worked with when I was with GFOA Consulting, I mean, one of the things that oftentimes does not get looked at is the potential of underfunding infrastructure and facilities. And, you know, it's a point that gets missed. If you're not replacing your infrastructure, if you're not updating your facilities, your debt levels may be very low, but you're not any healthier financially. It'd be like with your house, if you're not replacing your roof, if you're not maintaining your siding, if you're not updating your electrical systems and your plumbing as it's needed, but you're not borrowing money, well, you're not in any better financial situation than you would be if you were investing the money that you needed to invest in your house. And you know, again, I would point out Milwaukee County as an example of that. You know, with hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance and not keeping up with replacing facilities. That's when I did bond rating agencies with Milwaukee County. That's what bond rating agencies were concerned about. What are you going to do about all these facilities that are well beyond their useful lives and you haven't replaced? Those were the things that bond rating agencies were concerned about.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
So I still remember in one of your weekly reports, which I appreciate, that we were going to have an Ehlers on investments. So I'd like to see that, because investments are just as important as watching your debt.
That is something we've been planning, and we're just it'll as soon as they're available to be at a GGF meeting, they'll be there to go through that.
So next couple, if not next one, next couple of GGF scheduled meetings, it'll be in one of those in the next 1 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And you're on that committee, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Anything else for item C? Right, then we can go to item D, which is the cancellation or rescheduling of the April 1st Village Board meeting due to the spring election being held on April 2nd. Board? Discussion, questions, concerns? Madam Clerk, anything to add? I don't put you on the spot. If you have nothing, you can.
Thank you for the opportunity. I was just hoping that we could potentially just reschedule. I am down one person in the office. My other deputy clerk, as you know, is out on leave right now. And Casey will not be coming back until after the April 2nd election. We did advocate for that third position because it is definitely needed, and we are seeing the difficulties with just the two of us. April will be a very busy election. So if you are so willing to, it would help my staff and, with Maddie and I out very much. So thank you very much for the consideration in advance.
Is there a full docket? Do we know? Is it going to be a very busy meeting? Can we cancel it or should we move it a couple days later? What do we know about?
I'm going to defer to.
Steve? I would say that generally the first Monday of the month is less busy than the third Monday. And the reason for that is that there are more items that go through public safety and public works and then get referred to the board. Like if you notice the consent agenda today only had one item that came from GGF. So, generally, I think the third meeting has more on it than the first meeting. I keep a 3-month outlook on all of the meetings that we have scheduled on the whiteboard in my office. And at this point, there's not a lot on April. It's still a little ways out and there could be things that come up, but I do not have a long list of things for that April 1st meeting at this point.
Would you agree to cancel the meeting or would you rather have the meeting?
I'm here at the pleasure of the board.
Good answer.
I would say, I would agree though, definitely with what the village clerk is stating, that I think you could reschedule it if you wanted to later in the week, but I would definitely agree with not having it on Monday. And Donna is kind of humble about this, but I know, she's out there at the polling sites by 5 a.m. at the latest, making sure that they're set up, and we'll be here past midnight probably.
6 o'clock. Well, we're here at Village Hall at 5:45
there.
last time. And then
End up doing that.
night before, with the meeting and coming in at
Need to do it up
6
here.
that morning or 7 that
Do it
morning.
the same week.
So respectfully, I don't know that we need to cancel it. I'm just saying, on the day after elections, we are running around to the school in addition to having to go to the county to deliver all the items. So Wednesday's tough. I think we'll have our bearings back to us by Thursday. If you would consider rescheduling, Thursday would be much better for us.
That would be my,
That you would want to go. And again, I do appreciate your consideration.
that would be my motion for discussion is to move the meeting to the first Thursday in April.
The 4th,
4th.
I'll second.
Who seconded?
trustee Jan Miller. Motion by trustee Baum. Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Kaminsky.
I agree with this because I don't want to skip a meeting. We skip a meeting, we're all going to be here till midnight we know that for a fact. And there could be something important on this agenda. Let's just do it Thursday.
Does Thursday work for everybody else? That's
Yeah.
for discussion purposes.
I'd have to look at my calendar.
Usual time.
I don't know if I got a county meeting. April 4th, yeah, because the following Thursday would be the Chamber of Commerce event.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with moving it off of April Fool's Day. That's just a joke in itself.
Well, thank you all very much.
You haven't voted yet.
This is true.
Further discussion on the motion to move it till Thursday. No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Not opposed? Motion carries. Now. Next item is item E under new business, which is Green Bay Packaging Development Agreement for the development of the property located generally along I-41 between Holy Hill and Rockfield Road. Village Board may enter into closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 subsection 1 subparagraph E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating when competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and then may reconvene into open session to take such action as it deems appropriate. And for new business item F, which is Administrator 2024 Performance Goals Update. The Village Board may enter into closed session per Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85 subparagraph 1, subsection 1, subparagraph C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and then may reconvene into open session to take such action as it deems appropriate.
Make a motion that we go into closed session for items E and F.
Okay, and
And
items E and F will include whom?
The E, we will include the village attorney. And do I need village planner and village engineer?
And the Public Works Director.
Public Works
I'm gonna leave
Director.
Matt out.
Okay, yeah, don't want to leave Matt out.
And then item F,
Everybody can go except the board and the administrator.
all right, motion made. Do we have a second? Motion made by trustee Baum, second by Jan Miller. Is there any
I'll
discussion
second.
on that motion? No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, was that trustee Jan Miller that seconded that?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Nyrider, trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jan Miller,
Aye.
trustee Phil Hudson,
Aye.
trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
trustee Terry Kaminsky, and then village president Walter.
Aye.
Thank you.
Welcome. Before we adjourn into closed session, the next village board meeting will be on March 18th here at the Village Hall Boardroom at 7 PM. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you all for watching, and have a good night. We are adjourned. Please turn off your microphones.